Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
In Sussex County, Council member John Riley soundly defeated his challenger in the Republican primary. And in Cambridge, a 13-foot statue of Harriet Tubman was unveiled at the Dorchester County Courthouse. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The fight over the 5th District Council seat in Sussex County saw Riley win with 62% of the vote over his challenger, Keller Hopkins, who garnered 37%. But this was no ordinary challenge since Hopkins had the backing of Councilmember Mark Schaefer. On the phone with us this morning is Susan Canfor. She's a reporter for Coastal Point. Joining us later in the studio will be Greg Bassett, editor and general manager for the Salisbury Independent. So, Susan, I want to turn to you and ask you about this election, which clearly he trounced his opponent, Riley did. And what do you make of this? And what are the implications?
He sure did. I talked to, of course, I covered the election, and I talked to Mr. Riley about 10 o'clock Tuesday evening, and he was very rushed, and there were phones ringing behind him, and, the reporters were calling him. But in his polite, gentlemanly way, he said that at that time, he had, I think he was very close to 60% of the vote by around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. All of the precincts hadn't reported yet. But he was very humbled, and he took his time and talked to me and said he did not think absentee ballots or early voting or mail-in votes would change the results, at least not enough to cause him to lose. And he said he was very grateful to everyone who voted for him. He said he was humbled and that nobody does this by himself. He said it's a team effort, all the volunteers, all the people who gave financial contributions. He said, I am very humbled by that, and I make this pledge to the new 5th District because the geography is so different. And he was referring to the redistricting, which made his district a little bit different as far as his constituents. He said, I pledge to go out to meet with people and to hear their concerns. And that, of course, is what every constituent wants in a good council member. I tried to call Mr. Hopkins, who did not return my calls or answer when I called him. And the same thing happened the next morning. He was completely unavailable. So Mr. Riley has won, and I think that's a good thing for the Sussex County Council. He's a very strong member of the council. He listens. He considers everything before voting. He is a Republican, but I would say he's more moderate. He's conservative, but he also listens to what people need, and he will change his mind if there's a strong enough argument made. I think he's good for the council, and I'm glad he's going to have another 4 years on the council. However, it was a very contentious campaign. There were a lot of accusations thrown at him, as you know, and as we discussed here, week after week, since Mark Schaefer in late August called for John Riley to resign, saying that he unethically and wrongly accepted tons of dirt from a developer who was looking for a place to put it. And Mr. Riley, who runs a farm, said that is a common agricultural practice and nothing out of the ordinary, and that he was fully permitted and had all of the papers and permits from DENREC and had done nothing wrong. Mr. Schaefer would not let it go, and my guess, Don, is that he will not let it go and that he will try to have charges brought against Mr. Riley even after the election and have him probably have him investigated or set before the county's ethics commission. That's what I expect to see happen.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. So what is it that is at the heart of the dispute, do you think, between Schaefer and Riley? As I understand and I know that Schaefer has a desire for some high in density housing along Route 1. The corridor said certainly what he wanted. What's going on here between these two?
That's what John Riley has told me. He said, you don't want him to win, your constituents do not want him to win because as though the traffic and, the density and the development isn't bad enough along that corridor, he and Keller Hopkins both want to see higher density in that area. So that's not something that people who travel on that road want. It's certainly not something that people who are moving here for the first time want to see. The people behind the scenes have all said that in Mr. Schaefer's case, it's a power struggle. He wants power on the council because he's in the minority right now as far as votes go. He and Councilwoman Cindy Green almost always vote together. They were elected together, and they kind of ran the side-by-side campaign. And unless he has somebody else on the council who will vote with him, he wouldn't be able to have that higher density if it became an ordinance, or even if he just made a motion to look into it. It wouldn't be possible without those 3 votes. So that's what everybody behind the scenes is saying. Mark Schaefer is a power-hungry man, and that's the only reason he wants to get rid of John Riley. I asked him that during a phone interview, and I said, Mr. Schaefer, I hear that you're a mean, power-hungry man.
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely not. That's not true. That's just people who don't want me in there, who don't want my ideas. I can't get any ideas before the council. They won't let me bring in experts. They shoot down all of my ideas. And Mr. Riley said that is absolutely ridiculous. Any council member can put anything on the agenda or invite any experts to come and talk to the council. So it's kind of his word against his word, but there is an awful lot of behind-the-scenes talk about Mark Schaefer wanting that kind of power on the council.
What does this mean, by the way, in terms of development in general? We obviously are focusing on the Route 1 corridor for the high density, which is what Schaefer wants. But, I mean, do either of these two, to your knowledge, differ in terms of trying to curb some of the development that's occurring inland?
Yes, I think so. I think John Riley listens very carefully, as they all do. I think they all do. Even Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Green, they listen very carefully when a developer goes before them. Of course, they have to go. The developer has to take the proposal to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which either gives a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation to the council to either approve it or turn it down. And if it gets a favorable recommendation, John Riley does not automatically approve it. He asks a lot of questions about what this will mean for traffic, what this will mean especially for summertime Saturday traffic. There have been a lot of people who live in those areas that used to be quiet farmland that are now being developed, who go to those council meetings and testify and say, when I was a child, I could run through this farmland and play, and now we can't even see through it. It's just buildings and traffic, and we can't even see to the other side now. And the problem is, what if my older mother or father gets sick? How will the ambulance get through? Where would a helicopter land if there was an emergency? There's just too much development too fast. So Mr. Riley told me during a very recent conversation that development is coming. There's nothing we can do about it. It's going to grow. This area is going to grow, and it's growing fast, as you know, Don. The president of the council, Mike Vincent, has said that the council can only do so much to stop it. If somebody owns land, they have a right to develop on it, and there's only so much council can do. They cannot tell somebody who owns land what he can do with it up to a point. They can up to a point, but it can be developed. But John Riley said, he said, I get it. The farmers are aging out. The kids don't want to take over the farms, and somebody drives up their driveway with a $5 million check and says, here, I'll buy this farmland. You can relax the rest of your life. He said, I get it. I understand. It's hard to say no. The development is coming, but he also said that doesn't mean we have to say yes to everybody. We can still say no. We can still ask questions. We can still try to temper it so it's not so much so fast that it just becomes a place that's unlivable.
Do you have a sense, by the way, in terms of comparison, how Schaefer approaches this kind of development outside of the Corridor 1? I mean, are they similar in nature in terms of Riley, or what sense do you get?
He, during the meetings, he really doesn't say much. Most of his comments are behind the scenes. He will ask a couple questions, and he almost always votes, for developments, especially for high-density developments. But he doesn't say as much, and he doesn't ask as many questions as John Riley does. Behind the scenes, he'll say things, and he'll make accusations. But at the meetings, and I've covered many of these meetings, he's not much of a talker at the meeting. So John Riley, maybe he's thinking and maybe he's considering, but it's not outward like it is with a lot of the other council members, including Riley.
I want to also turn to this idea of the resource officers at these schools. We know that there have been a number of shootings, some of them at the schools across the country. What are you seeing, particularly in Ocean View and in Sussex County in general? At
the Ocean View Town Council meeting this past Tuesday, the Ocean View Council passed, I guess not passed, I guess they appointed the first full-time school resource officer for Lord Baltimore Elementary School, and that's on Atlantic Avenue, which, of course, is the main street that runs through Ocean View. His name is Sergeant Reese Bradshaw, and I've dealt with him many times. He's a nice young man. He mostly has handled public relations for the police department, but he went to, I think it was like a 6 or 8 week training specifically for school resource officers during the summer, and he learned specifically how to be a school resource officer. I talked to the chief. yesterday, Chief Kenneth McLaughlin, and he said when they have these training, they learn a lot about how to protect children, and they cover topics including laws that involve what you can and can't do in schools and what you can and can't do with juveniles. There have been resource officers at Lord Baltimore. Kind of all the officers have been resource officers. All of the Ocean View police officers have been out there and keeping an eye on the children, especially in light of recent shootings and emergencies that we've had nationwide. But he said it got to a point where they were there so much that they really needed a full-time school resource officer, like most of the schools in Sussex County have now. And they decided to appoint Sergeant Bradshaw. His salary will be $75,658 a year, and of that, the Indian River School District is contributing $40,000. So $35,000 of that will become the responsibility of the Ocean View Council. The chief said that his officers are fully trained. If you remember that very hard-to-watch video that we saw of the officers going into the school in Uvalde, they were kind of back and forth. They didn't know what to do. One of them stopped and put hand sanitizer on their hands while children were screaming, and an active shooter was killing children left and right. And I asked the chief about that, and he said, Susan, you would never see that in Ocean View. He said, our officers are highly trained, and our mission would be to go in immediately and put a stop to that and protect those children. He said, and this is a quote from the chief, when that school is in session and that school is full of people, we have a responsibility to keep them safe. The school resource officer is just another example of how seriously we take that responsibility. So the school resource officer, Sergeant Bradshaw, is in place to keep the children safe. I also asked the chief if there had been any problems. This school, I think, goes from pre-K to 5th grade. And he said, I asked him if any kids have taken, weapons to school or, sticks or knives or made any threats. And he said, absolutely not. They've had no trouble whatsoever with those kids. And part of the reason is the chief is in that school every single day, along with the school resource officer. And they talk to the children. They have breakout sessions with the children. They teach them manners. They teach them how to behave, how to respect each other. And they have many more classes and sessions planned with the children. And the chief thinks that's really the root of how to stop these problems, at the beginning when these kids are really little. So it's a good idea. I have a lot of respect for Chief McLaughlin. I've known him a long time. I talk to him probably 2 or 3 times a week. And his heart really is with the community and certainly with that school and with those children. And we also have the editor of the newspaper where I work has a 7-year-old who goes to school there. Mm. So, of course, all of us are very concerned about her safety because she's kind of our newsroom mascot.
Let me ask you this. In terms of Sussex County, you indicated that there are other schools, obviously, that have resource officers. Do you get a sense that they're as deeply involved? I mean, what sense do you get about how this is all working out beyond
my understanding is it works out well. The school resource officers are full uniformed officers that carry a weapon, so they have a presence. And, the kids see them, and the kids who aren't misbehaving feel safe, and the kids who have a tendency to misbehave would think twice. That's my understanding, and that's my sense. Of course, the high school kids are more likely to misbehave than probably the little ones up to 5th grade. But I think it's a good idea, and it's absolutely necessary in today's world. Nobody ever thought that would happen. In any of the schools where it's happened, none of us ever thought some of the terrible things that have happened would happen. And every one of those parents and grandparents, when they're interviewed by television newscasters, through their tears and in their grief, every one of them says, we never thought this would happen in our little town. So we never know. And it's an absolutely good idea to have them there.
We'll be speaking with Susan Canfora. She's a reporter for the Coastal Point. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you, Don.
We now turn to an historic moment in Cambridge history with the unveiling of a statue of Harriet Tubman at the Dorchester County Courthouse this past weekend. Several hundred gathered under the hot sun amid the speeches, song, and dance, as well as a performance of Tubman herself. On the phone this morning with us is Dana Patera, who is the manager of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Don. It's good to be here.
So tell me then a little bit about this event. We ran a story earlier this week, and it was quite a scene.
Oh, it was. It was a wonderful tribute to Harriet Tubman. There were several hundred people in attendance, including many elected officials and dignitaries. The program really was outstanding.
So tell me then a little bit of how that was pulled together, because it's been a few years. There was the traveling statue at one point, which really kind of inspired everybody.
Yes, like many things related to Tubman, we become inspired by her determination, by her tenacity, her desire for social justice. And this project was a labor of love for so many individuals and organizations.
And you had a number of speeches and also song and dance as well as performers.
Yes, that's correct. The program was both interpretive in nature and educational.
Now, the statue actually has two Harriet Tubmans, the one as a young girl who is reaching up to her older self. And here's how the sculptor, Wesley Wolford, described the meaning of these two figures during the ceremony.
The key points, so this is Harriet Tubman and that is Harriet Tubman. This is Araminta Ross, not far from here. She was in the Bucktown store, and an overseer threw a 2-pound weight, which is right down here. I encourage you to rub it and find it. It's a great Easter egg. He threw it at another enslaved person, but hit Minty in the head. So there's a little wound right here from that wound. Harriet talked about that event, turning her into Harriet Tubman and giving her the visions that helped her along her path. So this story is her first vision. Her first vision is of her future self, and she is drawing strength, finding the strength within herself. Her future self is handing a generational key to her, which is in her hand. I encourage you to come up and rub it. She is giving her the strength to say, this is the strong woman you need to become, because you're going to need me now, and 200 years from now, they're still going to need us. So reach within yourself and become that woman.
That again was the sculptor, Wesley Wolford, who described the meaning of these two figures. Now tell me then a little bit about the Harriet Tubman experience there in Dorchester.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, of course, this year marks the bicentennial of Harriet Tubman's birth. And in March, Governor Hogan declared 2022 the year of Harriet Tubman. And there have been a number of programs and events that focused on Tubman during her bicentennial year.
And what are some of those?
Well, we had, of course, her big 3-day birthday celebration where we kicked off the year of Tubman in March. And we've had some special events and programs at the park that were all free and family-friendly. There's been a number of events along the byway and in Cambridge. And now in September, we're culminating the year of Tubman with an International Underground Railroad Month. And so last weekend was the unveiling of the statue in downtown Cambridge for the Day of Resilience. And we've got some additional events coming up at the park and in Cambridge later this month.
So why is Tubman so significant, do you think, in terms of her legacy?
Tubman is significant because she means so much to so many people. The Tubman experience here in the Choptank River region has been a labor of love for so many individuals and organizations, and the effort going into creating and developing this experience from the byway to the Park and Visitor Center to the mural and just most recently to the statue in front of the Dorchester County Courthouse has come from all levels of government, from municipalities all the way up to federal agencies, and really from the community and non-governmental organizations and family members that have lobbied and really gotten the attention of the government to bring together the resources needed to really share this experience. The entire experience has been the project has been decades in the making, and it certainly has not been without challenges. But I think, if you look at each piece of the Tubman experience, it's a great example of how agencies and individuals and organizations can really put their different side to work together and provide a great experience for tourists and people that are traveling to learn more about Harriet Tubman, as well as address and educate people about social justice.
I want to turn to the statue because we did do an interview with a great niece of Harriet Tubman, Tonette Coffey, and here's what she had to say about the significance of that day.
It means so much to me that she is honored in a place where she's had to rescue her own family members. And this is the place where she became who she is. I'm glad that we have a piece of history as a landmark at the Dorchester County Courthouse to show her mark made here in Maryland. And I'm honored to have her blood in my veins.
What do you think this says about the community here?
I feel as though the community is changing for the better, and that doors are opening, and education is key to all of that.
Now, the rest of the family, did they participate in trying to put this together?
The rest of the family was involved. One of the relatives was a model. They used facial features from my aunt for Harriet Tubman, and they used my little cousin as the body of Minty. We were there, and it's been a journey. The ancestors spoke, and Harriet Tubman is there in the courthouse today.
Finally, Dana, it seems as if there are a number of statues, there's a number of murals that are throughout Dorchester County. It sounds as if this movement has really taken off.
Yes, it has, and we really saw an increase in interest of Tubman starting back in 2019 with the mural and, of course, the release of the focus feature film Harriet, and then carrying on into 2022 with the discovery of Ben Ross, her father's home site there in Madison. Archaeologists have been excavating that site. And now with her 200th bicentennial celebration and all of the media attention and programming surrounding her 200th birthday, yes, there has been certainly an increase in momentum. And really, what better time to celebrate this great and wonderful daughter of Maryland.
We've been speaking with Dana Pateros. She is the manager of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park. Appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning.
All right. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. So, Greg, I want to turn to you. And one of the things that's come up is this development of this tiny home village on Ann Street. Tell me then a little bit about this effort. Seems to echo some of the stuff that we're seeing done in Delaware.
Yeah, the buildings they have, they're called Pallet Houses, and that's actually the company from Texas that manufactures them. And there are these little tiny houses, and they're over there on Ann Street, which is part of the Church Street neighborhood right behind the Grace United Methodist Church. It's a super location, and the idea is to give homeless people a place to be, as opposed to the shelters, which are on a rotating basis, or some of the permanent shelters. But they have a little bit more independence, a little bit more freedom. They have a home in which they can operate from. It won't eliminate people from being on the streets as much as you see in Salisbury, which is sometimes awkward. But at least they're not living in the woods somewhere, which is a problem. And they'll be, contained into one area where they can be treated for health issues. There's a common area, a common bathroom facility. But these little houses are pretty nifty and very efficient.
So what kind of assistance do we expect that they might get in addition to obviously having a house to live in?
Well, Christine Chestnut, who's the homeless advocate for the city, does a great job in terms of coordinating with all the different nonprofits, whether it be the village, the Joseph House, which provides food and support. There's also she also helps coordinate with people who need training, who need drug assistance, just the transient nature. She keeps track of everyone. They develop a rapport, and she works with the nonprofits and the health groups to get these people. Sometimes they can go into go-getters, or perhaps they even need to be into lower shore enterprises. There's lots of different options for people once that they've sort of been declared and you know where they are. They can be evaluated, and you can see what kind of services they need to maybe get them out of this cycle.
How serious is homelessness here in Salisbury and Wicomico County?
No one really knows. It depends on what the statistics are. You can sort of make them whatever you want them to be. But one of the things is it's not a problem unless it's a problem, and we see from time to time in Salisbury that it's a problem. That Salisbury has a reputation for homelessness. One of the things is that a lot of people who seem homeless are not homeless. They are part of a program, and they might just be out, walking around the streets for the day. You might see them soliciting for money, at the Wawa or somewhere on the street. So even though they have a home to go to, they're still out in the community, and they would appear to be homeless, but they're not necessarily homeless.
There's also an initiative, I guess, by Title Health, Chesapeake Housing Mission in Wicomico and Somerset counties to try to get people to be better, more healthy. Particularly, I understand that there's some 11,000 families that live below the poverty level that are living in single-family homes in Wicomico and Somerset counties, and a lot of them may just not simply have heat.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because this is a really interesting project. So you've got, Title Health, who has a responsibility, as the nonprofit medical provider for our community, for our region, to make sure that we're all healthy in whatever way that they can. So what they have done, in the last 20 years or so, is really focus on doing preventative health care for all of us, to check in to make sure that we don't have to go to the hospital, that we're not going to cost the system a lot of money by being sick. So there's a lot of preventative focus. Then you have Chesapeake Housing Mission, which builds basically the best thing they've done is build ramps on people's homes for people who are disabled, can't get access to their homes, and they're able to move around in certainly a better way. Great group. They raise money. They rely on volunteers to a large extent. But what they're going to do now is also do renovations in houses where there's a health concern. So if you have a mold problem or a roof problem, a drainage problem, a problem with your kitchens or with rotted wood in your house that's going to affect your home and perhaps cause you to have an accident in the house by falling down, or be cold in the winter, not have the most effective heating system, whatever. They're going to do the carpentry type repairs that will make your home a healthier place. And they do this through the nonprofit donations. So it's an extension of what they're doing with the ramps, only they're bringing their carpentry to a new level and they're helping people in a whole new way. It's really innovative, and I think it's going to be really good for the community.
These efforts, are they a new phenomenon, do you think, in this city? That we have obviously the tiny homes, but we also have this as well. I mean, is there some renewed interest or renewed effort at trying to deal with homelessness, and obviously even those people who may live in a single family home? But
well, I will say, our Mayor Jake Day has really made this a focus. So one of the first things he did when he came in was he wanted to ensure that veterans, there were no homeless veterans in the county or the city. I think in the first survey, there were like 27 people that they identified as homeless within the county. I think 11 of those were in the city. And through subsidizing rental situations, the city was able to place all those veterans into homes within the city. So there were no homeless veterans anymore. And then I think that's extended. But what you see here, especially with the tiny houses, these are good ideas that have been practiced elsewhere. So you sort of have an idea for how things should be done. There's kind of a book for how to do these things, what works and doesn't work. And we're able to learn from the other experiences. Also, these pallet homes, which are very popular, there's a movement for tiny houses all across the country in different forms. But in this situation, these pallet houses have been tried elsewhere and with great success, and the city's going to piggyback on that. Not that it's going to be, it's going to be perfect all the time. There are going to be issues. We also learned during the pandemic. People forget we had that little tent community that was created on the west side to try to get homeless people contained in an area during the pandemic. And the tent city was working pretty well. Then there was a terrible storm that blew the tents away, and they had to use other things where they had funding, a lot of federal and state funding to put people in hotels and stuff. But now we'll have this 74 structures over there. I encourage anyone to go over there to Ann Street to look at it. It's behind where the old railroad station was, the historic railroad station in that part of town, behind the old Coca-Cola factory, if anyone remembers that being there. But right over there on Ann Street, and it's a neat little operation.
We've been speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager for the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Earlier, we had on the phone with us Susan Canfora. She's a reporter for the Coastal Point, and we appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thanks, Don.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.